They laughed when he showed up at the wedding. A simple farmer, dressed in modest clothes, standing beside a radiant heiress who looked like she belonged in a world far beyond his reach. Whispers filled the room, and smirks spread across faces. What could she possibly see in him? They thought. To them, it was a joke, a mismatch of worlds that had no chance of lasting. But what they didn't know was that this farmer had a story, a determination, and a heart bigger than anyone dared to imagine. As the days turned into weeks, the whispers didn't stop. They questioned her decision, mocked his humble roots, and dismissed their love as a fleeting fantasy. Yet, behind closed doors, something extraordinary was unfolding, something that would leave everyone who doubted them speechless. This wasn't just a story about a farmer marrying into wealth. It was a story of grit, loyalty, and a bond stronger than the world's cruelest judgments. But what happened next was something no one could have predicted. The tables were about to turn, and those who laughed the loudest would soon have nothing to say. Stay tuned, because this story is just getting started. The wedding had been the talk of the town, but not for the reasons most couples would hope. The union of a hard-working farmer and a wealthy heiress felt like a scandal wrapped in gossip. The guests didn't hold back their opinions that day, letting their disapproval show in every sideways glance and whispered remark. Some claimed she'd be naive, swept off her feet by a man with no real future. Others insisted he was using her, climbing out of his humble life through a ladder of love. Yet, there they stood, hand in hand, exchanging vows as if no one else existed. But the whispers didn't stop after the ceremony. The town was relentless. Everywhere they went, people stared, speculating about their marriage. She was an heiress with wealth beyond imagination, accustomed to a life of luxury and privilege. He was a farmer who rose before the sun, hands calloused from years of hard work, used to earning every penny through sweat and determination. They seemed to come from two completely different worlds. How could such a pair survive? Behind the closed doors of their modest farmhouse, they were building a life together, brick by brick. She traded her designer shoes for sturdy boots and learned to navigate the uneven dirt paths of the farm. He taught her how to plant seeds and tend to the crops, explaining each step with a quiet pride that made her smile. It wasn't easy. She struggled with the physical demands and the drastic change in lifestyle. But she didn't complain. Every challenge brought them closer, though the world outside refused to see it. Her family had been one of their loudest critics. They couldn't understand why their daughter had turned her back on a life of comfort and endless opportunities to live in what they saw as hardship. Her father, a man who valued status and appearances above all else, was particularly vocal about his disapproval. "You're throwing your life away," he had told her before the wedding. "This won't last. You'll see." His words haunted her on sleepless nights, especially when she overheard her husband apologizing for not being able to provide her with the life she once had. For the farmer, the pressure was unbearable at times. He felt the weight of the world on his shoulders, determined to prove everyone wrong. The gossip, the judgments, they all fed his insecurities. He worked harder than ever, often pushing himself to the brink. His farm had always been his pride, but now it felt like his only defense. If he couldn't succeed, if he couldn't give her the life she deserved, the naysayers would win. The strain began to show, not just in his body, but in the way he sometimes pulled away from her. She noticed, but she didn't push. She knew he was fighting battles no one else could see. Meanwhile, her old friends from her privileged life didn't make things easier. They would occasionally visit, their words laced with condescension disguised as concern. "Are you really happy here?" they'd ask, their eyes sweeping over the modest home and simple surroundings. They didn't understand the joy she found in the little things, like the way the sun painted the fields golden at dusk, or how her husband's laugh could light up the darkest days. Still, Their words planted tiny seeds of doubt that she fought hard to uproot. As the months passed, the challenges grew. A drought hit the region, threatening the crops and with them, their livelihood. The farmer worked tirelessly, trying to save what he could, but the odds were stacked against him. He rarely spoke of his worries, but she could see them etched in every line of his face. Despite her inexperience, she stood by his side, learning and helping in any way she could. They were a team, even when the world outside refused to see it. But the conflict wasn't just external. The strain of their situation began to creep into their relationship. Arguments sparked over small things, an offhand comment, a misunderstanding, or the sheer exhaustion they both felt. There were nights when the silence between them felt heavier than words, and she found herself questioning whether love was enough to overcome everything they were facing. Yet, even in those moments, there was a spark, a reminder of why they had chosen each other. The turning point came when a local reporter caught wind of their story. What started as a small piece about their unconventional marriage quickly gained traction, spreading beyond the town. People from all over began to weigh in, some admiring their love and determination, while others dismissed it as a fleeting fairy tale. The attention was overwhelming, adding another layer of pressure to their already strained lives. But the most unexpected twist came when her father decided to pay them a visit. He arrived unannounced, stepping out of a sleek black car that looked utterly out of place on the dusty farm road. His presence was as imposing as ever, and his disapproval was written all over his face. "I came to see for myself," he said, his tone cold and clipped. The conversation that followed was tense, filled with veiled insults and thinly disguised barbs. The farmer remained respectful, though his hands clenched tightly at his sides. She, however, didn't hold back, defending their life and their choices with a passion that left her father momentarily speechless. Yet, even after he left, his words lingered, casting a shadow over their lives. The farmer began to withdraw, consumed by the need to prove himself. He spent longer hours in the fields, pushing himself harder than ever. She tried to reach him, but the wall between them seemed to grow higher with each passing day. The world continued to watch, their story unfolding like a drama for all to see. Supporters and critics alike speculated about how long they would last, each side convinced they knew the outcome. But behind the scenes, the farmer and the heiress were fighting battles no one else could see, navigating a storm that threatened to tear them apart. And just when it seemed like the storm might win, something unexpected happened, something that would change everything. But that's a story for another time. It had been weeks since her father's unannounced visit, but the weight of his words still hung in the air. The farmer felt it most deeply. He hadn't said much since that day, retreating into himself and focusing on the farm with a single-minded intensity that left little room for anything else. She watched him grow quieter, his once warm and easy laughter now rare. It hurt to see him carry so much on his shoulders, especially when all she wanted was to remind him that they were in this together. The drought persisted, turning the fields into brittle patches of earth. Every day was a race against time, and every failed attempt to save the crops felt like a personal defeat. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and cast a fiery glow over the land, she found him sitting alone on the edge of the field. His head was bowed, his hands clasped tightly together as if in silent prayer. She sat beside him, the silence stretching between them. Finally, he spoke, his voice low and strained. "Maybe your father was right," he said. "Maybe I wasn't the man you were supposed to choose." His words cut deep, but she didn't flinch. Instead, she took his hand, her voice steady as she replied, "You're exactly the man I chose, and I'd choose you again every single time." Her conviction was unshakable, her love for him shining brighter than any doubt. They sat there together, watching the last light fade from the sky, a quiet understanding passing between them. The following weeks were a turning point, though not in the way they expected. The drought had taken its toll, and the farm faced its worst harvest in years. It was a devastating blow, but it forced them to confront the reality they had been avoiding. They couldn't do it alone anymore. Swallowing their pride, they reached out to the community for help. It wasn't easy admitting vulnerability, never is, but to their surprise, people responded. Neighbors came together, offering what they could. Some brought water and supplies, others lent their time and labor. Even those who had once whispered behind their backs showed up, a quiet acknowledgement of the resilience they had come to admire. It wasn't just about saving the farm anymore. It was about the strength of a community rallying behind a couple who had refused to give up. Her father, too, surprised them. He returned, this time not with judgment, but with an olive branch. He had seen the media coverage of their struggles and the outpouring of support they had received. It softened something in him. I still don't fully understand your choices, he admitted, his tone less harsh than before. But I see now that you're stronger together than I gave you credit for. His words marked the beginning of a fragile truce, one that would take time to fully mend, but was a step in the right direction. She saw a glimpse of the man she had once looked up to, and though their relationship was far from perfect, it gave her hope that they could rebuild. As the seasons changed, so did their fortunes. Rain finally came, breathing life back into the land. The fields slowly turned green again, and with the help of their neighbors, they were able to replant and start anew. It wasn't an overnight success, but every small victory felt like a monumental achievement. Through it all, their love deepened. They had faced trials that would have broken many, but instead they emerged stronger. The farmer learned to lean on her, understanding that he didn't have to bear the weight of the world alone. She, in turn, found a renewed sense of purpose, embracing the life they had built together with unwavering determination. The attention from the media eventually faded, but the impact lingered. People who had once judged them now saw their story as an example of perseverance and the power of love. They became a symbol of what could be achieved when two people refused to let the world dictate their worth. Years later, as they stood together on the same land that had once seemed so unforgiving, they reflected on how far they had come. The farmhouse had been renovated, the fields were thriving, and their family had grown in ways they never imagined. Their journey had been anything but easy, but it had been worth every struggle. Her father, now a frequent visitor, sat on the porch watching his grandchildren run through the fields. He had grown to respect the man he had once dismissed, seeing in him the qualities he hoped to instill in the next generation: resilience, humility, and an unyielding sense of integrity. Their story became a quiet legend in the town, told and retold as a reminder that love isn't about where you come from, but where you're willing to go together. They had defied the odds, silenced the skeptics, and built a life that was undeniably their own. And though the whispers had long since faded, their legacy remained, a testament to the fact that sometimes the most unlikely beginnings lead to the most extraordinary endings.